I want to welcome all of our guests tonight to Pete and Peggy's house. I might give you some background just so you kind of know what's been going on the past few days. What you have joined is a group of master fiction students who are participating in a week-long workshop. For double-digit years, the University of New Mexico sponsored the Taos Summer Writers Workshop. Unfortunately, last year they canceled that sponsorship. However, all of the master fiction students who are in the class this year got together and said, we don't need the University of New Mexico. And so, with the help of John Dufresne, who is the instructor and mentor to these 6 master fiction students, and thanks to the support from his wife Cindy, and thanks to Pete and Peggy, who have hosted what has been the 4th session today, we have this special gathering with a couple of readings from poets and a reading from a play. And that will be followed by music. I might say my name is Jim Bob Jones. I am the spouse of one of the master fiction students, and having nothing else to do, they asked if, or told me that I would be emceeing these events. And so we've had readings Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday, and then the readings tonight. We're thankful for the rain. We'll take just a few more minutes as the ground crew rolls up the tarp and the pitchers warm up with a few announcements. And you won't really know where these announcements come from, but just take my word for it, it's what's been going on all week. To the members of the master's class, the proprietor of the Alley Cantina, Call Me Back, the person who left Bartlett's Familiar Quotations, and a how-to book by John Dufresne at the Alley Cantina on karaoke night. That person has shown up, and because of the wiles of the proprietor of the Alley Cantina, he made a swap. He traded Bartlett's Familiar Quotations. He got to keep that, and he gave the person The Art of the Deal. He felt he came out way ahead. Other announcements as we proceed through the evening. I do want to introduce a couple of our poets, both from eastern New Mexico, both from Lee County. If you don't know where Lee County is, it's in the most southeast corner of New Mexico. It borders Texas on the west, or Texas is on the east, and on the south end of Lee County. There are many similarities between Taos County and Lee County. We're both in semi-arid regions, although tonight would be, the exception to that. They're both considered desert areas or semi-arid regions. And then there are dissimilarities. They have the silhouette and the steady hum of pump jacks, and we have this. They're at 3,600 feet approximately elevation, and we're at about 7,000 here. Taos County voted 70% for Secretary Clinton. Lee County didn't. And so the similarities and dissimilarities go on. Nonetheless, we're excited to have our special guest here, and especially excited to have all you here, and hope you enjoy yourself. Jim Harris is going to read first. He's the director of the Lee County Museum in Lovington, New Mexico, and the publisher of the Lee County Museum Press. He's the author of Frontierland, Pioneer Spirit, Essays on Lee County, New Mexico, and co-author with David Minton of From the Bull Barn to Bucking Broncos with Glenn Sorsted of Water and Rock. Jim taught at New Mexico Junior College and ran the Literature in Place. That's the Southwest Connections Conference in Hobbs, New Mexico. Jim?
Well, thank you very much, Jim Bob, and much thanks to Peggy and Pete for having us out here at this beautiful place. Hope we get to see you guys again sometime. I'll invite you down to Lee County, where there are some folks who did not vote for Trump down there, right? I'm going to read a couple of poems or three from a book called Water and Rock that Jim Bob just mentioned. I need to say thanks also to John Dufresne for putting this conference on and for inviting us up to. Thank you, John. Good to see you again. And Cindy. Where's Cindy?
Cindy's here. Oh, back there. She's filming.
All right. So this is a new book from the Lee County Museum Press. It's I have half the poems in here. The other half are by a writer from Canada. His name's Glenn Sorstad, the first poet laureate of Saskatchewan, and a longtime friend of mine. This is the 15th book from the Lee County Museum Press. And this just came out a couple of 3 months ago. I'm going to read you a couple of poems from there. I wanted to say first, this book came about after 27 years of fishing together, Glenn Sorstad and I, at some lakes up in northern Saskatchewan. And one of the lakes is named Jan Lake. That's the primary one, but when you get up in the northern part of Canada, all the lakes are connected, and you can go to dozens of different lakes and literally travel thousands of miles without getting out of the water. So this is a celebration of, and this is the subtitle, Water and Rock, Fish and Friends in the Boreal Forest. This is a very beautiful place. It's untouched in a lot of ways, and it gives you this feeling like some very isolated places that maybe some of us might have known at earlier times in our lives, or our country might have known at earlier centuries. So it's a beautiful place, but I wanted you to know that there is a dark side to being up there, and this is a book of poems and some prose that has to do with both of those. And so I want to read you a couple of poems that maybe are looking to the darker side just a little bit. This is called Burials by Water, and it goes, wait a minute. I'm not a cowboy poet. Okay, so where was it? So, Burials by Water. Jan and the waterways around it, the other lakes and rivers connected by arteries that offer their own blood rushes, are not without danger, just recreational pools for rubber floats and skinny dips. Take to the waters carelessly and you die of hypothermia in a few minutes, or find your brain scrambled eggs on a rock. Dozens of boats have been sunk, scores of First Nations people lost in the dark waters where a reef or boulder rips boards, shreds aluminum. The sound of a baby screaming in the night, fog. The way back not clear, the frozen brain shutting down, dark figures on shore, your words aloud, what's below calling. And along those same lines, it turned out that I had 3 poems that have to do with burials and, like I said, the dark side. So this is called Place of Dreams, and sometimes the dreams up there in this beautiful, beautiful place are nightmares. I need to tell you that at the end of this, the word Missy comes in here, and that's the name of my wife, Mary, Mary's dog.
My dog.
So, all right.
Mary, the dog is missing.
Well, yeah. Okay, Place of Dreams. Fish hard on the water all day, you sleep peaceful in the cabin all night. But the lake is also a place of dreams. The day so sensual, water images swim through dark night schools, through a shallow cove in the spawn. They can be sensuous mermaids on rocks, but mostly focusing on day's objects. Lunds, beaver, water, oars, rods and reels, the wife's radiant face in the afternoon, bush sun, the dog's sleepy ghost in the boat bottom. The nightmare boat takes on water. In the rush, saving all, the dog gets trapped beneath the boat and drops into a watery grave. Fingers red, she's in your arms, lifted from her wet grave. A chorus of voices mourning, Missy, Missy, Missy. And here's the, thank you, thank you, thank you. She saved you applause to the end. This is called Reefs. Now I need to acknowledge one of my fishing buddies here too. Terry Bumpus has been going up there to Canada for 17 or 18 years now. Has it been just about that long? I know he doesn't look that old, but he is. But anyway, he was up there this year as the last 15 or 16, 17. Anyway, he can identify with this. Reefs. Traveling Jan's a lesson in self-preservation. Its rocky bottom filled with boulders like the size of automobiles. Narrow reefs stretching like Arabian swords, ready to slice whatever crosses them. Eggshell boats racing the surface. The pilot needing every foot of a mind map, a spotter in the bow for certain drifts. Things go wrong though, crossing the placid mirrors full of blue sky, white clouds drifting. At full chat, in the middle of a wide channel, you find an unmarked rock. The Yamaha revs, and if you are lucky, you fly above the seat and land again, cowling still attached, your heart still beating. So, there are 3 poems from this book, and I'm going to now read you something that was written, what I'm about to describe actually happened 9 weeks ago this afternoon. And I'm calling this Man Overboard, Lessons in Angling, Boating, and Keeping Your Head Above Water. So there I was again in another place where I should not have been, underwater, cold water, below the surface of Otter Rapids in a Saskatchewan lake that had been covered by winter's ice only 3 days before. It's frigid water, approximately 35 degrees Fahrenheit. Darn near Arctic or Siberian. It's hypothermia cold when the brain begins transforming itself into an ice cube with the mental wires going down in just a few minutes. I was carefully and colorfully dressed for wintry air, not sharp water. Heavy boots, long pants, 3 layers of Canadian shirts, a baseball cap from Perotti Cigars, an orange rain suit covering all of me from head to foot, not to mention the camouflage life vest layered between 2 of the Great North shirts. I had been in the rain suit and the boat for over 8 hours, and what clothing had not been wet was now soaked through and through. How heavy were the clothes? This is weighty clothing in water, and getting bulkier and more burdensome by the second. And with all of me below the surface for only a moment or two, I wondered if this was curtains for me, a liquid shroud, and if I would ever see Mary's face again. If she would know what had happened to my body floating in this benumbing place so far from home and 10.6 miles from the camp where the nearest humans were and where I was supposed to be for night that would dip to below 40 degrees, at least a shivering 2-dog night. Just before my head bobbed above the surface, and second to my thoughts of Mary, I thought of the boat with the running motor getting away from me and piercing delirium all night on the shore. But then I could see the boat was still beside me, the motor at slow trolling speed, the 16-foot aluminum lud moving in a circle. Grabbing hold of the gunwale, I paused long enough to ask myself how in the hell I ended up in this water. What's going on? What happened? As the boat slowly made a counterclockwise turn, turning with it in a fluid dance, I realized what must have occurred. With the engine running at a very low RPM and I was preparing to quit fishing and motor back to the camp, I had stood up to reach over the seat in front of me to snap down the lid on a rubber fish bucket filled with 4 fat walleye and a 10-pound northern pike. That's when a wind moved the front of the boat and the 2 easily maneuverable rudder flipped to the right. I exited from air and the boat into the breathless water on my right. Man overboard. Holding onto the boat with both hands, I started talking to myself, repeating, holy shit, or something like that. My first impulse was to get to the front of the boat and grab the nylon anchor line, thinking there in the icy water that above all else, I did not want the boat to get away from me. In the bow, I might grab the anchor line and get myself back into the boat. Bad idea. I worked my way forward by running my hands along the gunwale, but when I reached the front, I realized it's much harder to get in the bow than in any other part of the boat. It sits higher out of the water. Then I start working hand over hand to the back. Meanwhile, the Lund is still making slow turns while the wind is also slowly pushing the boat and me toward shore. Sound good? Moving toward shore? Unfortunately, shore and Otter Narrows is an almost sheer rock cliff. A few scattered and slippery round boulders at an edge that plunge into very deep water. Not a good landing. About midway to the back, I remember that one oar is wedged between 2 aluminum braces just over the gunwale. I pull myself up enough to reach over the edge and I grab the oar. It's solidly in. So with both hands holding on for dear life, I try to pull myself up and in. Another bad idea. What with the weighty clothes, I don't have the strength or the agility. I am able to get one part of my right calf up. I have some relief. I rest, take a few deep breaths. But when I attempt to lift myself up and put the left leg over, I can't do it. I try once, I try twice, I try flinging my leg. I do it once, then a second time, I throw the shin bone to the hard aluminum edge. I think I hear a bone crack, but it turned out later to be only a bruise. So I gave up on boarding from the middle of the boat and decided I would move hand over hand to the stern. As I move, I think about the propeller turning slowly but scary, RPM. Over the years, I've heard the prop hit solid rock, and I wonder what the 20-horse Yamaha will sound like hitting flesh and bone. So as I get to the back of the boat, holding on and floating beside the engine, the prop bumps against the rock wall and the engine dies. More good news, I don't have to worry about the prop cutting off my leg. So I attempt to lift myself into the rear of the boat. I'm still too heavy, don't have the strength. I grabbed hold of the motor. That doesn't work. I reach for the seat and can touch only its back edge. There is a lip on the back edge of the seat, but not enough to hold with my fingers. I wonder if I could get my foot into the rear and put the tip of the thick sole hiking boot under the edge. I let go of the boat and float back enough to lift my right foot over into the boat. That's when I realized that if I do the same thing with the left foot, I'm going to have to put my head underwater again. I paused for a moment thinking about whether or not this is such a good idea. What about the impact of the cold on my brain? I'm already wondering about the clarity of my thoughts after this long in the icy water. That's when I reason I need to lift the left foot in and do it quickly. With my right foot wedged under the lip of the rear seat, I lie back in the water. My head goes under. I think of the time I was a child and was baptized in warm waters in a blue-collar Baptist church on the south side of town. My left leg goes up over the stern, and after a couple of slips, the left boot fits next to its mate under the lip. I try to lift my body up and get stuck at 90 degrees. I lie back in the water again, keeping my head above the surface, trying to avoid another baptism. I rest for a moment and inhale deeply. I think to myself, if I don't rise up all the way this time, I'm not going to get in this boat. With my hands in front of me in knots, I struggle, water tugging at the back of my shirt. At 90 degrees, I stop again. I strain, I groan, my teeth grinding, water spewing from my mouth and nose. The next 45 degrees are hard, but the last degrees are easy, and I lean to my left into the motor, bracing my body and relaxing for a moment, listening to my breath before I let my boots drop into the bottom of the boat. Made it. I'm not going to drown or to spend a freezing night on a shore crowded with moose and bear. This is when the adrenaline racing through me slows. I look at my right hand holding on to the side of the boat as if I'm worried that something might throw me over again. The hand is shaking. There is no warmth here under the overcast sky. The wind rising again. It's almost as cold in the air as it was in the water. But I say thanks to somebody or something, and I wonder what the scales would say if I were to weigh this moment in the boat. But weighing myself would require standing up, something I do not ever want to do again in a small moving boat. Thank you. I had to do a little prose tonight since this was a prose conference too. Right? And there's one guy who was around me now after I had that experience is Terry Bumpus, and he'll tell you, you want to talk with him sometime, that I spent about 2-3 hours shaking after I got back to the camp there, just warming up. But anyway, made a good story, right, Terry? Thank you. So, you're going to introduce Pete?
I feel like I need to defend the cowboy hat. Jim, the cowboy hat does not make you a cowboy poet. I want to introduce our second poetry reader, Peter Mladinic. Close? Mladinic, excuse me. I knew it wasn't Jones. Lives in Hobbs, New Mexico, received his MFA in creative writing from the University of Arkansas in 1985. His poems have been published in numerous literary magazines such as the American Literary Review, Puerto del Sol, MSS, Poetry Northwest, Poetry East, River Run, the Evening Street Review, and Common Ground. He's the author of a chapbook at the Blue Earth Gallery and 2 full-length books of poetry, Lost in Lee, Southeast New Mexico, poems and Dressed for Winter. He teaches English at the New Mexico Junior College in Hobbs. Peter.
And thank you, John, for inviting me to read, and you folks for coming, and Peter and Peggy for hosting us in this beautiful yard with the magnificent mountain in the background. And Jim and I do have some copies of our books for sale. I'm the director. He's the director of the museum, and I'm officially the director of the museum press. So I guess it balances out. But I've got 6 poems to read, and I think of them in occurring in pairs. And the first 2 are really the first and last parts of a 10-part poem with the strikingly unoriginal title, The Invisible Man, thanks to Ralph Ellis, The Invisible Man. But 9 of the sections have that term in the subtitle, but the last section doesn't. And so I'll just go ahead and read the first section of this, and then the last section, and then move on to the other poems that I have. Somebody
What
telling me
happened to our
something.
podium? It's falling apart.
The subtitle here is The Invisible Man Plants a Kiss on the Forehead of Absence. Inside him is a concrete wall, stores behind it, a luncheonette, a stationery, cleaners, 5 and dime, beauty parlor, liquor store, and downstairs from the liquor store, a bowling alley. The invisible man who has bowled there walks up to the refreshment counter and asks for toasted pound cake with ice cream. Spreads the ice cream over the cake with the back of his fork. A late Saturday morning in early March. He raises the fork of cake and ice cream to his open mouth. Balls knock over pins. Behind the invisible man, someone is bold to strike. He's got an omniscient narrator, so he knows it was a strike. And then this is the last part, a different landscape actually, and one that Jim Harris and Terry Bumpus are very familiar with. They frequent the high desert area in Big Bend a lot, so this has something that, with a Big Bend in it. His agenda: to place a lens before a leaf in the sun and evoke a flame, to see a magnificent cottonwood green in the pale high desert, to see a hawk on a wooden post, to walk at night a runway where in daylight planes land, to gather mesquite and lay it near a fire pit, to strip naked on a canyon rim and shower and towel himself dry and put on clean clothes, to put ice in a glass and whiskey, to sit in a chair and open a paperback, Agee's Let Us Now Praise Famous Men, to fly in a Piper Cub over a canyon, to see the green cottonwood alone in a corner of pale high desert, to know the cactus wren's soul is akin to the javelinas, and the sun's fire and the wind that dies, and egrets white on the pecos below a bank of trees blackened from fire sometime before he saw them. Okay, so that's one pair, and going to shift a little bit here to into a persona poem. So I'm not the speaker in it. This poem, I had about 10 drafts of it in an old notebook, and when I came across this draft, I knew it was the one that I want to keep. And all of these poems are actually, with the exception of the next one I'm about to read, most of these things are well over 10 years old, and some of them, let's see, 2000, 2001, even back then. So this is well over 10 years old, I think, but it's called The Graveyard Shift. This is my son, Mr. Flores. This is Eduardo, a good boy in second grade this year. In your class, when you called my name, Estella Flores, we shared that surname. I raised my hand. Then absent from all classes, absent forever. My corpse found 3 days later, shot, stabbed, beaten. I didn't see him, Mr. Flores, as he broke my nose, blood trickled down my chin. You stopped shopping at the Quick Stop, as did others, outraged they could leave me, a mother of 3 children, alone on the graveyard shift. Since then, 5 years ago, what you learned is that Kevin Phelps, my dealer and lover, settled in our crystal meth world a score with me. I can't undo what's been done, but if I could, I'd tell Eduardo, mind your sisters, stay in school as I, your mother, stay in heaven. Mr. Flores, we share that surname. Your essentials of biology lay open on the counter that night. I never heard the door open. Blood trickled down my chin. Well, not a persona poem coming up, but again, probably my longest poem that I'll read this evening, and the one that's took the least time to write too. As one of these things, well, the title of it is Accident, and it was, well, it maybe isn't all of our writing an accident of sorts? I mean, it's craft and all of that, but I wrote this one. My students were working on some essays, and usually, I try to be available for them, but I had a little bit of downtime And I wrote this, and it's once again it deals with. It's not a happy poem. Let's put it that way. It's not a happy poem, and hasn't gone through a lot of drafts, but here it is. Based on fact. Oh, I know what I wanted to say about it. Towards the very end, there's italics, but that's where I shift from I, the speaker, to someone who is spoken about or alluded to in the poem. I do have some happy poems coming up for you. I'm not going to leave everybody funereal, whatever. We have enough of that with the news lately, right? With the after 9 years and the I'm going to fuck. I mean, my goodness, we've gone from the best one of my lifetime, the top one to the worst. Can I say that? Can I, from the best to the worst?
Say it louder.
Oh, it's a nightmare. Yeah. I remember your daughter's
We're having a
help.
hard time hearing back here. A little louder?
A little louder.
Yeah, we're having a hard time hearing.
Okay, accident. I remember your daughter's help, how she helped me with my phone settings that day I visited your tattoo parlor to solicit a donation for the wellness of animals. I remember she was lithe and blonde, quiet, and savvy about technical things as young people were and are. Then last year, the Lovington leader's account of the accident that claimed her life and her husband's. Newlyweds, that Saturday night, the driver of a pickup who, I think, had been drinking, went through the stop sign at 90 miles per hour. Your daughter and husband died shortly after arrival at the hospital. Then, recently, the driver was in court. I can imagine some friend or relative telling you to forgive him. Let go, let God, something like that. Okay, let God do what God does. It's not my place to say don't forgive. So I'm out of place here outside the courthouse at the edge of the courthouse lawn asking, why forgive? Why not give in to the urge to welcome the misery of the one who took your daughter from you, gone forever, or will meet in heaven, but not here on the lawn or in your tattoo parlor or anywhere. I'm not thinking so much of punishment. You have a right not to forgive, to withhold, because forgive or not, your daughter's gone, who is vibrant and knew about megabytes and apps, and who, like her rancher husband, loved horses and the sky and daylight and his embrace. Someone says, I took the most precious thing, a daughter's love, from you. I didn't mean to. I drank whatever, then drove, sped, and T-boned I had no idea who that night. Here I am, beside my counsel. I turn my head toward the back. Your eyes meet mine. Well, now to pick up the, to shift the tone, to pick it up a little bit. Although for me, I was at a, I write, I guess I think of myself as writing free verse, but I like to be open-minded to fixed forms and anything. But years ago, back in, maybe the 77 or sometime, I was at a reading, and there was a poet there, Anselm Hollow, and he said, anything can be a poem. And one of the two people I was there with said, yeah, anything can be a poem if it's good. And I always remembered that. But for me, poems are transgressions. They're ways of getting an answer to that ever-changing question, who am I? Coincidentally, my friend Terry, sitting right here, was with me during the genesis of this particular poem from an old notebook. and I'm thinking of how many years ago this was. This is titled Blind Man Diving at Balmorhea. The sky above him bright, 15 feet from the board, the water fresh and cold, his body his to do and not do, guided by his brother's arm to the base of the stairs, near at hand his sister-in-law, his blind wife, and in their shadows, which form one shadow, we applaud. He rises to the chilly surface in late afternoon, when others are coming home from work, and down the road a piece flies circle rotting fish heads on a lake bank near a cluster of dilapidated trailers, one with a sign that says, "How do?" Spring seems like summer. We left the lake for this pool, cold and deep, bathers, picnic tables and shade, boards high and low, the blind man guided by his younger brother. He climbs, then makes the board spring, sees by the weight of his presence how it will be. Then, like silently bent, he dives. Our applause lives like fish in the cold, clear water. And a number of years ago, well, Terry and Jim and I and several other people I know, and maybe some of you, attended the film festival here in Taos. And this poem here has its genesis from a film that I saw one of those times. And this will be my last one. It's called What is Lost But Not Lost. And for me, this is a pretty upbeat poem, too, to tell you. I enjoy looking at the bicycles in old films, such as this one of Dawson, a mining town, now a ghost town. I like at the opening the long line of coke ovens, the miners, two men walking home from the mine. I like the bicycles, the dogs, the women's dresses, their hairstyles, looking into the faces of these Dawson citizens, wondering what happened after Dawson, where they went, what they did or did not do, what they did not say. The lady who narrated the film, her last name, Lois, said she and her husband attended graduate school in Chicago the following year. They had two young sons, Merrill the elder and Bill, who lives now in Eugene, Oregon, and introduced his mother on the film, which was shot by Mr. Loy in 1938. There are numerous shots of the boys, several of Bill in his playpen, and then one where he seemed a happy little boy. He had just learned to walk. There were shots of the mines, the houses that sat on mountainsides, the church, the school. Now, nothing there but the Dawson Cemetery. I like the moments of Bill when he was first walking on his own. I've no idea what he does in Eugene. He must almost be 70 years old. His mother, a young wife and mother in the film, sticks her tongue out in one shot. She was born in 1911. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Peter may not be available to entertain at your children's next birthday party. Just kidding. It's a special treat to have a reading from a couple of folks. Lois Fernandez lives in Taos, has for the past 14 years, I believe. She is the owner of the Taos Artist Collective and also a realtor, and I believe today she just closed a deal.
Woo!
And Steve Levine, who is visiting from Boston and Cape Cod. We're pleased to have Steve in town visiting. They're going to read from a play, The Golden Ass.
Yes, I am. I want to thank everyone for allowing me to be here. This is a play that
Speak up so everybody can hear. Sorry.
This is a play that I wrote based on what is probably the Western civilization's first novel. The Golden Ass is also famous for something else. Through the centuries, the university students who had to study Latin were not allowed to have this novel because it has sex in it, including bestiality. It's a celebration of what it is to be human, and there's two famous descendants from this novel. The first one is a story about 3 giant wineskins and a very drunk young man in the middle of the night, and he mistakes the wineskins for robbers who are trying to kill him, and he gets a knife and stabs them, and he thinks the wine is blood. He's so drunk. And then the next day he tells his story, and he gets arrested and put on trial, and it all turns out to be a festival to make fun of him and laugh at him because he made that drunken mistake. So the giant wineskins and the drunken would-be murderer shows up in Cervantes' Don Quixote. And at almost the exact same century, some 1600 years after The Golden Ass was originally written, one of the things that happens to this young man, whose name is Lucius, which is Latin for light, brilliant spirit, one of the things that happens to him is he mistakenly gets involved with the witches' potions and salves and gets turned into an ass. And this, of course, shows up in Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream, where Bottom is transformed into an ass. There's actually 3 characters in this scene. The first one is an old witch named Mancrasia, and Lucius is staying as a guest in her home. The second character is a slave girl of Mancrasia and her husband, and the slave girl's name is Enflamia. One of the themes in The Golden Ass is that both Lucius and Enflamia have brilliant golden hair. So, this scene is right after Lucius has been laughed at by everyone at the festival, and it's at night when Mancrasia is giving instructions to Enflamia to help her enslave young men. So the first speaker is Mancrasia.
Sweetly said and sweetly done as honey on the tongue. Now bring the ointment from the jar for winging silent flight. Nay, never that one sloppy slave girl. That would be disaster, turning me into an ass. Yea, that's the ointment there. Now spread the salve on smoothly. Start on top and cover every part of me. I feel it now, concealing skin, revealing feathers. Yea, my cheeks and nose are turning to a beak. Now I feel feathers all together, feathery wings where arms and fingers were. Now I feel talons for my toes and feet. Inflame you. Beware, young men. Are you the one Mancrasia wants tonight? Beware the cuttings of your hair.
What a nightmare.
That is how Mancrasia mistakenly used goat hairs, and the goat skins became wineskins that you battled breaking down our door. 3 wineskins crazed, enslaved to love Mancrasia. That's how I betrayed you, Lucius. That's why you should punish me. Yea, strip me naked and then whip me.
No whipping. Never. Stripping. Later. Horrible as your remorse is, are you sure you didn't dream all these fantastic schemes somewhere?
I swear it.
I'm on fire with desire to see that. And to try. To fly myself.
To fly from me? But why?
I want to fly.
Don't leave me that way. Stay. I love you. Stay.
I have an uncontrollable desire to fly. You love my physical form. You'll love me more when I transform into a giant owl.
An owl? Is that how you will leave me? Nay, it's dangerous.
I want to be a wise owl. Now. Not now.
Please don't force my remorse and guilt to help fulfill your dreams. While you abandon me, I see your fantasy is flying silently at some window.